Welcome to our channel. Today we are discussing the book Citizen and Subject by Mahmood Mamdani. This episode specifically will be taken at Wits University Press, which is the same publishing company for our book. We felt like it aligns with the context and the focus of the book as it is around the institutional ideological structure. So this discussion is conducted by two passionate African women who go by the names Sinalo, Sojanga and
Funeka, Mdletshe, of course.
Please join us as we talk about the legacy of late colonialism in Africa. So just to kickstart everything, while we're still talking about, this wonderful book, Citizen and Subject, Contemporary Africa and the Legacy of Late Colonialism by Mahmood Mamdani. So, Funeka, would you please explain on how does the content of the book actually directly or indirectly links with the readings that we've read in this course while we're still talking about the Shela journey, and maybe you can just take us through, maybe give us some of the examples of the podcasts, books and documentaries that actually enhance our understanding and also appreciation of the book, just so that, just to explain on how does the book actually relate to the content that we've actually came across within this course.
Well, thank you for having me. And to our viewers, hello, I hope everyone is doing okay. As you can see, I'm doing excellent myself. So let's just get into it. So the book is essentially about power, right? Citizen and Subject, it's about power, and it speaks about the power of colonialism and its impact on the development of African cities, right? Moreover, it speaks about, already we've seen that it speaks about colonialism. I think we've already established that. I would actually say that the book actually links to the theme of the course for this course, right? It speaks about, so the course is titled Shela Journey, a love guide to the practice, philosophy, and profession of planning, right? And so within the course, so we discovered a set of P's, right? 3 P's to be quite specific, and those P's were power, politics, and presence. And there is a reading in the course, right? It's titled Thinkers for Civil Society by Bent, and essentially in that reading, Bent speaks about these two philosophers, Foucault and Habermas. And he says these two philosophers help us to understand civil society, democracy, and obviously politics. Yes, and he also mentions that even though those two philosophers, they help us understand those concepts that I've just mentioned, they also have very different stances to the idea of civil society and how it should operate, right? And so he starts with Habermas, and he speaks about the Habermasian theory of communicative action. And he says, essentially, Habermas suggests that in order for us to achieve just and equitable societies, we should just have open communication as a society. We should communicate about everything, and everything should be just laid in the open. And then Foucault comes in and says, that's not feasible. That's not possible, because there's always going to be power dynamics. There's always going to be a person who has more power over the other. There's always going to be a person who has power, and there's always going to be somebody who's subjected to that power. And then if we take it and we link it to the book Citizen and Subject, the book specifically, Mamdani speaks about how the citizens are people that are educated, they're Western, and they're seen as being capable of self-governance. Whereas the subjects, they are subjected to that power, and they are seen as these rural, traditional people who are uneducated and not even capable of self-governance, right? And so we see there's this contrast between those two philosophers, right? And if we continue to speak about the book, I then thought, there's actually a podcast that I actually listen to. It's the Hidden Brain podcast, right? And there's this particular episode that speaks about what would Socrates do. So Socrates is a philosopher in his own right. And in that podcast, they acknowledge the different perspectives of different philosophers, right? And he speaks about how Socrates highlights that as much as these philosophers have different ideas about society, they're humans. And so whatever it is that they say, we shouldn't take it as the gospel truth. He even further says that knowing the limits of your knowledge is essential to knowing and understanding the limits of the human understanding, right? And he says no one has the full knowledge of what is going on around them, or even the knowledge about what is going on within. And so it is not fair to then claim that there's a certain group of people that is capable of governing another set or another group of people simply because maybe they're seen as being more advanced or more educated, you understand? And we shouldn't just base decisions that we make up as society simply because maybe this particular group has a set of values that we think are more advanced over the other ones. For example, in this case we've seen in our societies, we would find that African traditions and cultures are often overlooked, as well as their values, right? And we see that if a person is educated, they're seen as being more intellectually capable, and so they're seen as being the right person to govern, or in this case, the right person to have power. And the other one who's not educated, quote unquote, I'm just going to use the term loosely, they are then seen as these people who should be subjected to that power. Yeah,
I think it's a very nice book that actually does have a relationship with what we are talking about this year. So just to appreciate the philosophy, the practice, and also the profession, I think it also highlights that it's important for us to understand under philosophy, it's important for us to understand the history on itself in order to enhance and also to be able to come up with ways in which we can be able to practice this profession. So would be something like it's mostly about trying to dismantle and trying to give out a different perspective of like the history to enhance our own philosophy, our own knowledge about Africa, and also something that we can be able to take in consideration when we are practicing this profession, which is something that is very important. So it does have a link in understanding that in order for us to be able to push the other P, which is practice, in order for us to be able to push the other P, which is profession, which is the planning, we need to be able to have an understanding, a better understanding, and exercise the knowledge that we have, a correct understanding of the knowledge, which is philosophy. Then in order for us to have that, it seems like it's a more of like a black pot. Yes. You see those traditional black pots. Yes. If one lacks, like there's something wrong with one leg, the other two will then you finally see that the pot cannot be able to.
It can't balance.
Yeah, it can't balance. It cannot be able to stand. So in order for us to push the other P, practice and philosophy, we need to understand that it's important for us to have that correct knowledge, that different perspectives about the philosophy. So I think that the book is giving us that thing that we're actually looking for, that juiciness that we're looking for within, that history of Africa. So, just while we are talking about this, I think now can we then looking into trying to understand, since we're still doing this love guide, which is this Shela journey, so maybe we can explain to the viewers at home on how is love interpreted and understood in the course, and also in connection to the book. How does it interpret this love and understands it, and also from a philosophical research or political standpoint, is from which philosophical research or political standpoint is the book coming from, and how does the book help us understand the theory, philosophy, and also practice? How does it link the two? Because it's something that is very important, because we need to have an understanding of the theory at first so that we can be able to practice,
Okay, so to answer your question, the book doesn't necessarily speak about love, but the course itself, it speaks of a love journey, and says love is like a journey, a multifaceted and a very complex journey. I think we can all relate in a way. Right? And the book, it essentially shows love as a form of resistance. for instance, the Africans in this case, they were forced to neglect their culture, their traditions, their way of speaking, their languages. And it speaks of love as a form of resisting change and wanting to stay true to who you are.
Yeah.
Because the Africans, they really wanted to stay true to being who they were, right? But now they were being forced, and for them, showing love meant that resisting that change and not adapting to the European system, right? And the book is written in a form of post-colonial, and it's written from a standpoint of post-colonial political sociology, critical theory, and Mamdani draws on various intellectual traditions, right, including the critical theory such as Marxism. I'm pretty sure we remember cultural hegemony from second year.
Yeah.
Remember in the same group?
Yeah, we did a seminar.
Yeah,
on that.
he was analyzing power relations, right, and discussing the different ideologies and sociology and examining the intersection of politics, culture, and obviously in the realm of civil society, right? And for the most part, he was looking up at the ways in which things like colonialism were shaping our societies as Africans, and how then are we then relating to those spaces, right? So Mamdani offers various theoretical insights and practical experiences to show and explain how colonialism continues to shape the urban fabric in African societies, of which is something that we as planners are trying to address. And what do you know about him? What do you know about his profile? What does he usually write about? And what was his state of mind when he was writing this book? You understand?
Yeah. I think that's a very important thing that we need to consider before we even go to read a book. It's something that we need to understand. That an author has, his profile has some sort of a relationship, or there's something that actually pushes him to actually write such a book. So it's important for us to, even before we even talk about the whole of the book, what it has and what it talks about, what it's all about, we need to understand the author. So Mahmood Mamdani is an Indian-born Ugandan academic, author and political commentator. So he was born in Mumbai in India, and then he grew up in Kampala. So he studied Bachelor of Arts in Political Sciences in University of Pittsburgh in around 1967. So during his years of study, he participated in some of the civil social movements, such as the Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So furthermore, so you could say that firstly, that's where mostly you could see the understanding of social movements starts, because it's something that he also talks about from the book. So you can actually see that him being able to participate in such civil rights movements, social movements, then makes him understand to learn more about how do they actually function, and be able to write about other social movements that you could find here from Uganda, you just to name a few. So furthermore, during his years of career, he was a teaching assistant at Makerere University in Uganda. So that's where he was expelled later in the same year because of his ethnicity. You see, now it starts now to reveal on how actually something that you could say that it's more
developed.
You see, that's when you got to understand that actually there's issues around ethnic conflicts, because he got to actually experience that. And then he was later on appointed.
Is the best teacher, I agree.
Definitely. So then he was appointed as inaugural holder at University of Cape Town, UCT in Western Cape. So he left there after having disagreements with administration because of his draft syllabus, So he was stating that the university is teaching students about history from an American perspective. Ooh. So that's why he was expelled. That's why he got he had to leave because of that. So it's something that you actually see that he was trying to, the reason why he's talking about this, he's writing this book about, because this book is quite like 1996, which means after all the experience, having to go through all of this,
and to
being
actually
expelled.
think about it, it was literally the post-apartheid.
You could say that it's post-apartheid for this book actually.
But still a lot of things were still reflecting the apartheid and the systems.
No, for this one, him having to work at the UCT was actually before the apartheid ended. Can we please leave it at that?
We're going to use the term loosely, okay?
Yeah, we're just going to use it loosely. And please understand why we are doing this, because obviously, as much as we say that apartheid has ended, we're still facing a lot of issues that you could say that is some of the symptoms, or could say some of the things that makes you think that we are still under apartheid. But you're just going to use that word loosely and say post-apartheid. So it's something that happened before it even ended. So but this book is written after. Then now going back to this, Mamdani was then inspired by the colonial and post-colonial African politics, and his strong background in political sciences, because he studied that and African studies, and also his extensive research and personal experience in Uganda and some other African countries like South Africa. So those are the ones that actually inspired him and made him actually understand better on what is actually going on with the legacy of, considering that we're living in this era where there's still issues around colonialism, And then his work was also influenced by various intellectual traditions. You talk about Marx's theory. We just mentioned those things, and also post-colonial theory and issues. So his work was viewed as something as he views the past through a critical examination of colonial legacies. He sees it as a narrative that has been so simplified and portrayed as a uniformly negative force. So he's trying to bring up something that is most researchers don't actually tell us about, So it's something that is a bit trying to show that actually history is not that, it's not something that you could just simplify. It's too complex. You need to understand all the, the corners that actually makes us the way we are at the moment, and makes us actually see what is actually going on at the moment, especially with issues around governance, especially with issues around relationship between state and citizen. It's something that is very, very, very important for us to understand.
No, thank you. In reference to what we've already been discussing, because we're already having a conversation, we're having a very lovely date. So what would you say the genre of the book is? Are there any overarching themes that you noticed? Would you like to comment on that?
It's something that it's very important. Like, considering that the author actually studied political sciences, and also considering his experience, personal experience, you could say that Citizen and Subject is a non-fiction, so it's more of a political and African study book that has there's some sort of an intersection in the fields where we talk about the post-colonial theory, post-colonial history, and also sociological studies. So this book actually scrutinizes some of the overarching themes that you would look into, such as governance, power, the relationship between state and citizens. It explores how colonial rule established that bifurcated state system. He makes a distinction between citizen and subject, which is something that we need to understand, because it's something that is very important when unpacking the way people are actually stratified within these places. So he uses those two terms, citizenship and subjecthood. So he uses moving on, he uses an analytical approach, a comparative analysis, and also a critical perspective where he challenges narratives and also assumptions about African governance. development and also democratization, which is something that is very important. So I think that it's more like a stepping stone, or more like a first step in understanding our African history and also the legacy of colonialism, so around things such as governance, power. So those are the things that are quite important within this book.
I agree. The book definitely speaks about politics and obviously civil society, so obvious social sciences, it comes into play. So I agree with everything that you said, and it helps to shape the political identity of people in society. So I agree with everything.